Some see it as controversial, others see historic ties. But whatever the case is, Russia has been a friend to many African countries. Now, in this complex world of ever-changing global scenarios, these friendships remain. Russia is a member of different multilateral organizations, G7, G20, the United Nations, as well as BRICS, but is also known for withstanding foreign intervention and unwanted meddling. And this self-sufficient and independent foreign policy has earned it a unique role in the global order, something that we will look at today. Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Insights. I'm Kirana Baina. So in this episode, I have come to the Russian embassy here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and I'm going to be sitting down with the ambassador of Russia to Ethiopia, Ambassador Yevgeny Serhin, and we're going to be looking at the foreign policy of Russia towards Africa, towards Ethiopia, and in general. Do stay with us. Ambassador, thank you very much for having us today and giving us the time.
Once again, welcome to our house. We're always happy to see our good friends, Ethiopian journalists here, and I am waiting for pleasant moments of conversating with you.
All right, Ambassador. Well, we live in a multipolar world where different complexes of the world are changing constantly now and then. So what I want to know now is where can we place Russia in that? I mean, what is the foreign policy and what's behind the foreign policy of Russia in the 21st century?
Well, as you have already mentioned, we're now witnessing tectonic changes taking place on the geopolitical map of the world. They are characterized, first of all, by the decline of the power of the so-called collective West, and at the same time, the growing influence of emerging centers of power in our parts of the world. That means in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And we understand that these trends will only increase. Therefore, it's natural that Russia's foreign policy presently is rapidly reorienting towards enhancing closer cooperation with Asian, African, and Latin American partners. As far as Africa is concerned, the continent is indeed once again becoming a priority foreign policy direction for Russia. The defining moment that marked Russia's return to Africa was the Russia-Africa summit held in Sochi in 2019, which was attended by representatives of all 54 states of the continent. The next such forum is supposed to take place in summer of 2023 in St. Petersburg. Its holding is fully consistent with the logic of Russia's foreign policy in terms of promoting the formation of a polycentric type of world order. In addition to the summit, there are other mechanisms that promote our relations. Among them are Association for Economic Cooperation with African States established in 2020, the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, Direct Investment Fund for Africa, and many others. So we have many effective tools, and most importantly, there is a mutual desire to go forward together.
All right. Well, you've actually said it about the Russia and Africa relations, or Russia's relations with different African countries. I mean, for anybody who's looking closely enough, Russia has been increasing its partnership with countries considered the global south. And as you said, it's expressed in different ways in regards to Africa. And one thing that I want to go to in recent news is a couple of weeks back, the foreign minister spokeswoman of Russia has actually stated that Russia supports the permanent seating of African countries. It's also part of the expression, I believe, of Russia and Africa countries' solidarity. So can you please take me over that?
First of all, I have to mention one fact that the United Nations, which is in the middle of the present-day international order, was founded almost 80 years ago. And of course, since that time, a lot of changes have emerged on the international arena. That means that we as well have to adjust this global organization to the tasks of the modern world. One of the problems is Africa is underrepresented in the main body of the United Nations, I mean in the Security Council. Of course, Africa has its own, let me say, quota of free places for non-permanent members, but there is no African representative among the permanent members of the Security Council. So we need it necessary for Security Council to get rid of this defect, a dominance of a certain group of countries. You, I suppose, will understand which group I mean. Therefore, we are supporting the allotting of permanent places for representatives of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, which deserve this place. This will, of course, give them more opportunities to strongly defend the interests of their regions and their peoples in this global organization.
All right, so let's bring it specifically to Ethiopia now. And actually, it said that it was in 1943 that Ethiopia and the Soviet Union established diplomatic relations, and since then, different factors have shaped their relations. But now, bringing it to the present, I mean, in between that, there have been a lot of expressions of solidarity of the two countries. One of the things we can mention is, for instance, the Ogaden War. But fast forward to now, and what is some of the shared values between Ethiopia and Russia, and how is that sort of, shaping the foreign relations? What's the driving factor in the case of Ethiopia now?
There is a lot of different means, not only of communication, but interaction between our two countries. We have a very profound and well-developed political contacts, especially at the highest level. We have a day-to-day contacts through the channels of the two ministers of foreign affairs of our countries. But besides that, of course, we are building interaction and relations in many other spheres. In economic sphere, or in the sphere of economic cooperation and trade, in defense, in the humanitarian area, and of course, among one of the main areas of our mutual cooperation, we should mention our interaction within the framework of the United Nations, which we have already mentioned. So we are happy that our relationship, our development very steadily, and we believe that this development is possible, first of all, thanks to the mutually beneficial and mutually respectful character of our relations, which were officially established more than 125 years ago.
Now, recently, you've mentioned about our foreign minister, so I want to go to the visit of the foreign minister of Russia, Sergey Lavrov. He went to 4 different African countries, and one of them is Ethiopia. So, at his time here, he deliberated with Demeke Mekonnen, our foreign minister and deputy prime minister, and so this time is considered controversial by some. I mean, the West had their own narrative to make regarding why the visit occurred. And in this regard, I want to raise for you to elaborate on that. I mean, what the intention was behind the visit, as well as what can be expected from the deliberation.
We have a very constant and uninterrupted contacts at working level through the embassies of the two countries, through the ministers of the two countries. But of course, when we're speaking about bilateral relations of countries, a special meaning is attained to the personal relationship between the leaders of the two countries. To this respect, I can remind the personal meeting between our President, Mr. Putin, and Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, during the first Russian-African Summit in Sochi in 2019. And as well, a great meaning and a great role is played by personal meetings and contacts at the level of foreign ministers. I'd like to mention as well that Minister Lavrov has visited Ethiopia on several occasions already, as well as Ethiopian ministers of foreign affairs have been on many occasions in Russia. In July 26, 27 this year, our minister made another visit to Ethiopia. It was his turn now to come here after Minister Demike's visit to Russia last year, the previous year. So he while staying here in Addis, our minister was received by the president of the FIDRI, Her Excellency Sahle Zawadi. He had a very extensive personal meeting and talks with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Demeke Mekonnen. And as well, he had a very good and productive conversation on the phone with the Prime Minister, His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, who at the moment of the visit was out of the city. Nevertheless, we managed to contact, and the both sides were really very happy with the outcome. So I would like to note that this latest visit once again demonstrated a high level of political dialogue and trust between our countries. During the meetings and talks, a range of issues of mutual concern was discussed, including the progressive development of traditionally friendly relationships between Russia and Ethiopia. They confirmed the existing points of convergence of interests on different international and regional issues. The sides also discussed in detail the situation in Ukraine and northern Ethiopia. Russian support for the Ethiopian government's efforts to normalize the situation in Tigray and launch an inclusive national dialogue in the country was confirmed. Moscow will continue to stand in solidarity with Ethiopia's principled position on rejecting interference in her internal affairs.
Let me interject on that, excuse me, Ambassador, because you're starting to talk about foreign intervention, and I wanted to ask you something on that. Since Russia's foreign relations, it's known to be independent, self-sufficient, and another notable thing about it is that it doesn't intervene in domestic factors, but it does show support of solving domestic issues if there are some, and just providing general support instead of intervening in matters. So now, since Ethiopia had been facing different interventions and being misrepresented by the media, which I think Russia is, very well familiar with. So why don't you take me, over Russia's experience of that, and how can the Russian Federation share that experience with Ethiopia in a sustainable manner?
you have posed a very wide question. Well, I will try to reply in short. First of all, when we are speaking about support of sovereignty, which is given to any other country, we should understand that this support may be given in different forms. It may be a political support and on the international level. It may be economic support. It may be support to enhance defense capacity of our country. It can be humanitarian support and others. Actually, if we study the sum and substance and the internal character of our bilateral relations, we can see that our two countries are pursuing the policy of mutual support. For instance, during the last couple of years, starting from the eruption of the new stage of conflict in Tigray region 2 years ago, the so-called Ethiopian issue or Ethiopian file, I suppose 13 times was presented for the consideration of the UN Security Council. On our side, we fully supported the Ethiopian government's view that this case, I mean the conflict in the northern region of Ethiopia, is entirely internal affair of Ethiopian government, Ethiopian state, and Ethiopian people. Therefore, it does not need any international interference, especially when somebody is, while trying to interfere, is behaving like, let me say, an elephant in a Portland shop. Proceeding from this understanding, Russian Federation and as well as our Chinese friends, we have always blocked the movement of this issue, not to let anybody to interfere into the internal affairs, to meddle with the internal affairs of Ethiopia.
On that support, actually, we've been supporting each other, and that is Ethiopia and Russia. And that for that reason, Russia has also come under fire, including China as well. I mean, I think it was Mark Lowcock who accused China and Russia of delaying the declaration of famine in Tigray. So another thing that we can set straight is that one. Can you please take me over that accusation? And you've actually said it, you know, why when they open files, we have the habit of rejecting it because we see it as a blatant attack. So can you please help me set that straight?
First of all, about accusations and accusers. Let me recall one Russian saying, people's saying, and people is a wise entity. Our people is saying that a head is always burning on the head of the thief. So those who accuse us of anything, I mean, when they accuse Russia, China, Ethiopia, some other countries, they should first think and be aware that they themselves could be easily accused for what they have done, for instance, in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, what they are doing now in Syria or Libya, which was absolutely distracted by them. So if we move on the international arena all the time with mutual accusations, it is a way to deadlock. I think and I believe that we should not be fond of mutual accusations, but we would better find ways out of any conflict situation. This would be a short reply to your wide question.
Okay, so now let's move on to another thing. Ever since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, African countries had been faced with challenge regarding wheat, and because wheat import was mostly from that region. And One thing that recently happened is Russia actually withdrew from a wheat export agreement, which I think, it re-entered in again. Correct me at any point if I'm mistaken. And my question on that is actually, since Africa has been suffering at the realm of wheat in that regard, how has Russia been supporting Africa? And more specifically, actually, is now economically Ethiopia is excelling at wheat production. So in that regard, since Russia excels at wheat production and export, how can Russia support Ethiopia and at large Africa? But let's start with Ethiopia.
Very interesting question, really, and the whole story about wheat production, wheat supplies, so-called hunger as used as arms and so on and so forth. This is the issue which has caused a lot of arguments during the latest time. First of all, let us recall one fact, that the problems on the world food market, in the world food market, have started not after February 24th, when the Russian Federation began its special military operation in Ukraine. But these problems have started a couple of years ago already, as a result of miscalculated monetary and food policies of certain powers. As for the Russian grain, last year we have exported around 30 million tons of wheat. This year we'll be ready to export up to 50 million tons of wheat. Of course, once again, a question arises. We are ready, but will the other side be ready to let us, not let us, but to let our wheat, to let our products reach the needy countries? This is the problem. Regarding the Ethiopian situation, we of course know, we are aware of the amazing and really inspiring plans of increasing wheat production in your country. I have read a piece of news that before July it is planned to produce around 160 million quintals of wheat in Ethiopia. It is really a big quantity, and we hope that if these plans are realized, Ethiopia from wheat importing country will turn to be wheat exporting country. It is really a huge, a tremendous result. It will be a tremendous result. So, judging from the point of these changes in Ethiopia's agricultural policies and activities, I suppose that now it's high time for us to think about cooperation and assistance to Ethiopia, which should be, the direction of which should be changed. If previously we were selling wheat to Ethiopia or delivering it through as a gift through international organizations, so on, I think that more viable and more resilient direction would be to help Ethiopian friends to enhance their own production. And to this respect, the main means, I suppose, are lain in two fields. One is fertilizers, which are necessary to enhance wheat production here, and another is agricultural machinery, like tractors, harvesters, and so on, which are necessary to guarantee this production and getting and saving the harvest. So I suppose that Our next task will be to widen our cooperation in this direction. And what is really amazing is that Russia really has possibility to help in these fields to Ethiopia. Russia is the #1 fertilizer producer in the world. Next point, we have really very good models of tractors and other agricultural machinery. So it can be easily used on the Ethiopian fields, somewhere in Arsi, Bali, and other places. In the beginning of December this year, there will be, at least we are planning to hold here in Addis Ababa the 8th regular session of Mutual Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Cooperation. And I think that cooperation in this field of agriculture will be one of the main topics of our future discussions.
Coming to my final question. In the years to come, like I said in the beginning, the world is constantly changing. The foreign relations realm is very complex. So going forward, what's the kind of foreign policy that Russia is planning on perpetuating? Just a general overview of what's to come.
Our country is the most sanctioned country in the world now, not only in the world, but in mankind's history as well. Well, those people who have imposed these sanctions, they simply don't know well our history. Russians have used to live under sanctions for hundreds of years, in this or in another way. So those who are trying to impose sanctions on Russia should first think, will it work or not, and whom it will endanger or on whom it will inflict damage first of all. Because as we can see now, of course, we are not happy to be living under sanctions, but we will overcome it in any way. But look what is happening around our country and around the whole world. The food situation is deteriorating. The situation with prices in Western Europe are getting worse, is getting worse and worse. Fuel prices are rising. Who wins of it? I don't know, really. So I think that we should join our efforts to stop this stupid and insane policy of sanctioning anybody, as well as regarding Ethiopia. It is also suffering from sanctions. So it is possible to say that we are two soldiers in one trench.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your insights and for your time as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming and asking you really very interesting questions. I hope that our meeting would be interesting for your audience, and taking this opportunity, I am happy to extend my best wishes to all the to the whole Ethiopian people, and especially I'm taking this opportunity to mention the recent peace reconciliation agreements which were reached in Pretoria. I hope that it will be useful for the country to restore peace and to use more forces, more resources for the needs of development and well-being of the whole people of Ethiopia. Good luck to you.
All right, well, that brings today's diplomatic insight to an end. We've talked about Russia's foreign policy regarding African countries as well as Ethiopia, the different areas of support that we can expect from Russia, and other aspects of the foreign policy as well. As Kirana Baina leading you through the program, thank you for joining us once again, and until next time.